What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I'm rocking one of my Branded Bills caps today. Got the gold one in the background. I think we're getting another one sent soon. So shout out to Branded Bills, an awesome presenting partner for the show. We've got a lot to dive into today. We are going to set the scene for the season. This is the last non-game week podcast of the, I guess, off season. Really, I mean, we're in season by now, but you get what I mean. This is the last podcast before we'll have like legitimate games to talk about, which I am just thrilled about. I mean, technically, we've got the week 0 slate that we'll dive into a little bit at the end, but there've just been so many weeks and months, it feels like, of hypotheticals and speculation and all the, the off-season stuff, which can be entertaining. Don't get me wrong. I'm a podcast host. I can gab with the best of them, but I'm just ready to get it rolling. I'm ready to finally see this team in action. I'm ready to, really learn if the optimism that a lot of us are feeling going into the year is justified, or if, those that are more on the more of the pessimistic side of things are going to end up being proven correctly. I did, just before we got into everything, and we'll play a clip of Jay Norvell giving an update after yesterday's practice to kind of, transition us into the position preview on the offensive side of things. But before we did that, I just briefly here wanted to kind of set the scene for the season with how I am going to cover the team, essentially kind of my philosophy behind all of this. Those of you that have been around since the beginning, I think you get it. I certainly lean more into the more optimistic lens than, the pessimistic side of things. But I know that's not necessarily for everyone. And I just feel like I spent a lot of last season trying to push back against people who disagreed with me. And what ended up happening is I kind of just went in circles with folks who had their mind made up. And frankly, I don't know if that's the best form of content, because I'm spending so much of my time focused on, a small portion of the audience, or in some instances, probably people who don't even listen to the show, people who are just tweeting at me, commenting on Reddit, etc. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't have standards. I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive for, the highest possible achievements. I think with what CSU has invested in athletics, most certainly it's fair to say that over the last decade plus, the results have not been enough. I get that. I mean, I don't even know how many times I've said it at this point, but last year can't be the ceiling. That needs to be closer to the floor. But I also just think that there are some fans out there who would rather the team fail, who would rather see the team not succeed, because that would be validation of their own pessimistic beliefs. And it basically would mean that they're right, because everybody is so scared to go out on a limb, to be vulnerable, to, show any type of optimism, because they're waiting for the other shoe to fall. And I can't really say you're wrong if you're spurned after years of letdown and disappointment, because let's be real, it's been tough to be a CSU fan a lot of the years that I've been on this planet. It's been kind of a tough experience. But even through all of that, I choose to lean more into, optimistic and frankly hopeful coverage. If you subscribe to the newsletter, I wrote about this in reference to the Broncos actually earlier this week. But to me, why not go into the season with some hope, especially when you have rational reason to do so? I'm not saying be blind, bury your head in the sand. Like if you're a Rockies fan going into this season thinking they're going to win the World Series, that's just dumb. That's not even within the realm of possibility. I'm not saying do that, but again, like I just feel like there is a portion of the fan base who's been so consistently frustrated and upset that that's really all they know how to be. And because of that, because they're always waiting for the other shoe to fall, they can't appreciate things like winning 8 games. They can't appreciate things like beating Air Force in the Springs for the first time since 2002, beating multiple rivals in the same season for the first time in over a decade. I understand that the Rams had some favorable elements go their way when it came to the schedule last year, and you're going to play 7 home games again, which again is another reason why I'm optimistic going into the year. But like there are some elements of the schedule that are out of your control. It is what it is in that regard. I guess I'm just saying here, like if you're the type of fan who, going into this year is just chomping at the bit to say, see, this team sucks, to say, see, Norvell ain't it. I'm probably not the guy for you, just being realistic. I'm probably not, and that's okay. But to me, when you look at the state of this program, when you look at the athletes that are, prevalent across the board now, it's not just one or two position groups. I mean, you look at the DBs, the receivers, the tight ends. I mean, this is the biggest, the most athletic that the team has been under Jay Norvell by far. I'm going to play a clip here in a couple of minutes, but he actually talks about that this really visually looks like a Norvell team for probably the first time since he's been in Fort Collins. That's not to say that some of those moments that happened last year, particularly the bowl game, are not something that you shouldn't put stock into. I mean, again, I said it a million times that it was unfortunate how that game played out because it essentially lost them a lot of the goodwill that they had established over the course of the season. And that was an uphill battle as well because of how, frankly, mediocre the team looked in September. But they got it rolling there in October and November. And that's actually something I'm going to talk about later on in the show, kind of, I don't know, I keep saying set the scene, but kind of set the scene, for that Washington matchup by talking about some of the takeaways and some of the lessons learned from the times that CSU has gone into these Power 4 opponents' buildings and actually had a respectable showing. Most recently, you probably got to go back to like 2017 Tuscaloosa when CSU played the eventual national champions, #1 team at the time in Alabama. Really, both times they went down to Bama. I'm going to talk about that and just kind of what we need to see from CSU in that week 1 matchup. I don't think you can come out and just lay an egg the way that the Rams have, against Michigan and Texas and Washington State and some of these other, premier matchups that they've played under Norvell. Like I'm not saying everything's fine and dandy, mission accomplished. We are exactly where we want the program to be, but I do think that there are some fans out there who, again, would rather be right about their own negativity than to see the program succeed. And they just want that validation so bad. And I don't know if that's because of social media and the way that, things have changed just with our behavior as fans, but it's weird to me that the people that are dying to see this thing fail are itching to hit the reset button, which is basically a guaranteed 3 to 4 more years of trying to build this thing up while moving into a conference that's going to have stiffer competition across the board. What's best for the program in the long run is if things were to work out under Norvell, because that would mean you didn't waste the last couple of seasons. That would mean you could, hopefully launch off of what you did last year and get some real momentum rolling. And again, like go on to do even bigger and better things, make a conference championship, maybe even win the league, get to the playoff, that type of stuff. I mean, all of that is hopefully possible down the line. There's no guarantee. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't sit here with any type of guarantee that, it's all going to work out because we just don't know. But what I do know is that the grass ain't always greener and that it is a long battle when you have to start over again. And to the fans that are eager for that, I guess I just don't quite understand it. And that's where I'm at. That's not to say that I won't be critical at times. That's not to say that I won't be negative at times if the performance justifies it. But to me, being hopeful, being optimistic, it costs the same in the end as being pessimistic. You're going to have plenty of times as a football fan, as a sports fan, to be pissed off, to be frustrated, because that's mostly what being a sports fan is. It's Game 7 losses. It's Super Bowl beatdowns. It's getting swept in the World Series. It's all kinds of heartbreak. But when it goes right, God, it feels good. And we just chase that high year after year. And sometimes we end up feeling like Charlie Brown chasing the football. But, enough of being a sports fan is frustrating. Enough of existing on this planet is frustrating. If you're the type of person that can't appreciate anything about this, then why be a fan? And I just kind of want to start with that. I'm going to do my best to not go in circles with people that I'm not going to be able to reach. It is what it is. I'm not saying everybody needs to agree with me, or that, my coverage is the only coverage that matters, or that, I'm right and everybody else is wrong. We'll see how it all plays out. There's a real chance that, I'm too optimistic going into this year, but I'm always going to be genuine with you guys. I'm always going to do my best to give accurate and fair analysis. I'm not going to be over dramatic. I'm not going to use hyperbole. I'm not going to advocate to burn it all down when you lose, a dumb game here or there, because it's going to happen. It's a part of the college football experience. But I really do feel like if everything clicks, and that's a big if, this can be a really fun season. And I'm just excited about what the possibility may be this year, and kind of what's on the table for this group if everything were to come together. We are going to preview the offense. Shout out to everybody rocking with us on the Toyota chat. I really appreciate you. Joey says 30 plus years of being a CSU fan. I am surprised I still have hair. Norvell, just got to get the plays in sooner. I don't care who's on the field. Frustrating to watch last few years for sure. There's been some wonkiness. Again, I'm not going to sit here and have a straight face and say everything was perfect. It's not. You do need the offense to be much more in line with what was envisioned when he was hired in the first place, which is the, up-tempo, explosive, dynamic type of scheme we saw from him with Nevada. I mean, in 3 appearances with Nevada against CSU, I think they averaged 49.5 points or whatever it was. I mean, even the game they lost, they still scored 40 plus. We want to see that this year, most certainly. And I think that's possible. I think we are going to see the offense be more up tempo. I think we are going to see more versatility within the schemes that they run. I don't think it's all going to be spread out. I don't think it's all going to be under center, more of a pro style, West Coast based approach like we saw last year. I think we'll see a little bit of everything, hopefully. And I think we'll also see a dynamic group at the skill positions lead to a lot of different guys being contributors, which, maybe you don't have 4 or 5 all conference players at the end of the year because everybody plays a part in all of this. And instead of having, 1,000-yard receiver, somebody who catches double-digit touchdowns or something like that, instead it's, 3 or 4 running backs that were in the mix, multiple tight ends, 5, 6 different pass catchers out wide. And yeah, maybe you're not getting the individual recognition. You're not getting a bunch of dudes on the all-conference team, stuff like that. But I think in terms of how it impacts the team from a competitive standpoint, I think it's going to be a plus, being less dependent on, 1 or 2 guys to basically make everything happen for you. We'll see. But I'm optimistic going into this year. I just kind of wanted to set the scene, and with how I intend to cover the team, I know it's not necessarily for everybody. I know, the optimistic lens is not for every type of sports fan, but it's who I am. I'm not going to change for anybody. A lot of people seem to dig it. I think we've established a pretty cool community here, on the DNVR Rams side of things over the last 6 years. But that's where I'm at. So take it or leave it. Josh says in the Twitter chat, you have Indiana buying out of Power 5 out-of-conference games because they were rewarded for beating the schools they beat last season. I don't know. It's just funny to me. I think, if you want to look at things like I do, obviously I can point to the things like, well, they beat 8 teams last year. That hasn't happened very frequently. I can point to how infrequently they've beaten multiple front range rivals like they did last year because, I view things. So I'm looking for certain, stats, talking points that are going to validate how I feel. And I understand, if you are on the pessimistic side, you're going to instead point to the Fresno State game. You're going to point to Texas and CU. You're going to point to the bowl game. And the reality is there's some validity on both sides. But I just think that there are some people who are so scorned at this point that they can't appreciate anything. And it's just funny to me because I don't think it was always like that. I think the lack of success in the last decade in particular has really added some gasoline to the fire. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. I know they beat Utah State, who was a 10-win team in 2014, but we weren't poking holes in the lack of success against the big-time opponents with that 2014 team in the same way. You go look at the teams that they beat. It's a lot of 500 teams. It's a lot of teams that weren't in bowls, but we were stoked because guess what? They were winning. That's what it's all about. And I really do think it's the social media element and Twitter especially, but I just think so many people these days are looking for a reason to have their shitty take be proven right. And I guess if that's what you want out of this whole experience, all the power to you. But I mean, I have takes for a living, and I would certainly I'd way rather be wrong about, being down on a team going into a year and have it prove to be fun than the other way around. That's just me. Let's take a quick break. Let's shout out a couple of our partners. Please keep these questions, comments rolling in the Toyota chat. I appreciate everybody rocking with us. If I don't get to it right away, we can always star it and come back at the end of the show. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or whether you're hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the 2024 Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser, which is back as well. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. Toyota also offers more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail. It's what makes them so perfect for Colorado. They're great if you want to cruise around Cap Hill, but they're also great if you want to go on a road trip like our main man Kale, behind the sticks today. He's always going on these awesome road trips, taking pictures, all kinds of great stuff. Make sure you're following him. But he'd be perfectly suited in one of Toyota's many SUVs. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. I also want to talk to you about Cake Mortgage, the business owner's home mortgage partner. They solve some very wonky problems for folks who own their own businesses. If you're a regular employee of a company, you get a W-2, your income shows on your tax return. Traditional lenders, they love this when you go to, get a business loan or a home loan or refinance or something like that, because it's really simple. For business owners, it's more complicated. By maximizing legitimate business deductions and expenses, business owners can reduce their taxable income and they keep more money in the business, which is good, but you're also struggling to prove that you have the income coming in on your tax return. Traditional lenders, they don't like this. It gets complicated. They don't want to work that hard. Cake can get business owners approved by validating your cash flow through bank statements, through certified profit and loss statements, or your business tax returns. Good for creative professionals, contractors, tech entrepreneurs, business founders, freelancers, anybody who kills their own meat. Cake Mortgage Corporation, equal housing lender, NMLS number 1734623, licensed in Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions apply. Check out that link in the show description. All right, let's keep this rolling. Let's play the clip of Jay Norvell giving us kind of an update. He talks about the offensive line a little bit, talks about the fact that the Rams have, knock on wood, largely been able to stay healthy to this point. A couple of other things. Then I will preview the starting offense. I'll answer as many of your questions and comments as I can. I'll talk about those trips to Bama and what we want to see from CSU in the upcoming trip to Washington and more. But hopefully this works. We had some tech issues last week, but here is Jay Norvell after yesterday's practice, kind of giving an update.
Is it feeling like game prep? Obviously, it's not game week, but feeling a little bit like it now?
No, we're building momentum every day and getting the game plan in and really just starting to be more specific about what we're working on versus Washington. And so it's a good feeling as we get closer to the season.
How's the offensive line coming together as you kind of replace those older guys?
Yeah, it's going well. I think we're very athletic. We're big and athletic, and now it's all about continuity and chemistry. Tanner's taken kind of over some leadership in there. Aaron Karras, we've got some different guys working. Aitor's working at center now, and so it's a group that's really gaining chemistry as we work every day, and I think that'll just improve every day of the season.
How is Aitor doing with that?
He's doing good. It's just different when you're snapping the ball. You got to make your calls. You got to understand the snap count. You got to work with the quarterback and how to get the ball off. all those things matter, and he's getting good reps at that.
We haven't had a chance to talk to these captains. It's
Yeah.
an interesting mix between guys who long-time college football players, but new here. Some
Yeah.
guys have been here. Just kind of what do you feel about that group?
I've just been very impressed with the character and the attitude of the guys that we brought in. And I think, we have 2 captains that weren't even on the team in December. And that's really awesome. Jaquez Evans, Donut, has been fantastic. He's a really great communicator. And Jacob Ellis has been the same way. Those guys really care about the team, their teammates. They've been great leaders. And then you got guys like Braden and Tanner Morley that have been around here, that have done a great job. And then Owen Long. I just think Owen's got all the qualities of great leader. He's our youngest captain, and I'm really proud of him and his teammates for choosing him.
How's Braden's bond with the receivers going throughout this camp?
Good. That's been a big emphasis for Braden, is to start training those new guys and bringing the young guys along. And I think he's done a great job. He's got new tight ends too. So the receivers are all fairly new, and they're gaining chemistry every day and confidence every day, and we put them in a lot of situations so they can learn from each other.
You talked a lot about the importance of, needing to rebuild that O-line room when you came over. Just from a program building standpoint, how significant is it that, you look in the starting lineup, it's going to be probably 4 guys that you signed out of high school and developed?
Yeah. Well, it's all about the body type and the temperament. We love big, long guys with big length and height. And then we like guys that have the right temperament. And I think we have a lot of guys in the room that have that. We have depth. We have guys that can play different spots too. Like Alex Foster, he could play anywhere on the line. That's really helpful. Liam's done a nice job coming in. So that flexibility and versatility has been really good. And those kids that we've recruited the last couple years have all turned out to be good players.
How are you guys holding up health-wise?
Pretty good. I've been really mindful. We didn't really scrimmage the second week. We've gotten a lot of physical work though, and I think our guys are as fresh as they've ever been. We got a few nicks here and there, but I think our backs and our skill guys are really fresh, and we want to keep them going fresh going into next week.
We know camp can get loud for some guys, but you're at the last full term to going in the game week.
Yeah, I could feel the excitement building. The talk and the chatter is building. But this is a group that likes to practice. They look at practice as an opportunity to get better, and so we'll just keep building on that. But we got a great attitude in this group.
Jay, just in general, Justin's obviously talking about the offensive line, and you mentioned how it looks like the guys look like the way you want to. That's been a big emphasis for you throughout your tenure. Does this look like a Jay Norvell football team as you enter year 4 here?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'd like a little bit more height at receiver. But I think overall, we're starting to look like the body type that we're recruiting at each position. And we're starting to get more depth and competition at each position. This is by far the most depth and competition I've had since I've been here at Colorado State. And that makes everybody better. If kids don't feel the heat of competition, they just don't improve the way you want them to. So we're starting to get that now.
All right. Hopefully that video was not too shaky. Somebody took my tripod yesterday, which is, of all the things that I thought might get stolen in terms of my media gear, my crappy Amazon phone tripod was not one of them. It probably wasn't even malicious. They've got 8 million student interns running around out there. They probably just thought it was, part of their crap or whatever. But I wanted to play that because I thought a couple of things were helpful there. Talking about the offensive line, Ader taking over the center position, talking about the depth and the versatility that they have at the playmakers. Also, those guys trying to establish a relationship with BFN. I agree with Jay. Ideally, you'd maybe have a little bit more height at receiver, and that's where losing somebody like Jamari Person is kind of a bummer because I think he would have had a very well-defined role on this team this year, and it is what it is. Got promised some big things by a shady agent, didn't end up working out that way. He's at Liberty now. We wish him the best. But I thought that was a good way to kind of segue into all of this. We're going to preview the starters on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they're going to run so many different looks. It's hard to just pick like 11 guys because there's really like 15, 16 different guys, depending on what, look you're in, that are going to play a pretty big role. And even offensively, it's a similar deal. I mean, Rocky Beers, Jackson Warren, the running back room, whoever you put one, that's one thing, but it's not as simple as like he's the lead guy, everyone else is 2, 3, 4. Sean Payton actually talked about this earlier this week. It's going to be more like, these are more consistently impactful players, but I think everybody's going to have their own little role. And that's where, I think like Madden and stuff, it just kind of oversimplifies this whole process. But with that in mind, let's get into it. And I think let's start in the trenches, and we'll talk about the skill positions. But I just think the trenches were a bigger question mark coming into the year, given that you lost 3 starters, a couple of guys who had, played significant minutes for you over the last couple of seasons, and Savion Henderson, Jacob Gardner, and Drew Moss. Drew Moss hopefully going to make the 49ers roster. We shall see. But starting in the trenches at center, as we just heard, and hopefully I get this correct. I pronounce it like 18 times before the show, and then I always choke when I come on. But at center, it's going to be Big Aider Uriana Barrienchea. If it's got to be in the conversation for the longest name, especially non-hyphenated in FBS history. It's one of those that really overwhelms you when you look at it on paper, and I'm very curious to see how the broadcasting crew handles that. My guess is you're going to hear a lot of Big Aider, which is what the staff typically refers to him as. He has assumed that role as the starting center. It was Trevin Heels in the spring. Heels been in the program for a long time. He is undersized. There had been some issues in terms of snapping the ball. I talked about that a little bit in the last couple of weeks, and I wondered if this was going to be the case. But yeah, Big Aider, he has taken that role as the starting center. Had heard great things about him coming into the program out of high school. And one of the things that I think is really encouraging about the direction of the program, one of the areas that I would point to as definitively successful under Norvell, is the efforts that they have had to rebuild the offensive line. I think especially the success that they've had signing and developing players out of high school has been huge. You can lean on the portal to fill gaps. It's really hard to do that in the trenches, though, because to really have a great offensive line, it takes a ton of reps. It just takes continuity, and that's hard to establish in the portal. Like, you have spring ball, you have fall camp, but it's just not quite the same. There's nothing as valuable as guys getting those live game reps together, and that takes a couple of years to do to really establish that, chemistry and continuity within a group. I love that when you look at the offensive line this year, it's going to be 3 guys you signed and developed out of high school. And you're going to have a couple of other guys who are going to be on the 2 deep and who you would trust to, play in certain situations as well. Right now, I'd say Trevin's probably the center too, but like on the actual depth chart, I wonder if it ends up being Phillip Ocon, who is another guy, out of California who we're really excited about. Has some type of hand injury. I think right now it's got like a big old club on his hand. So again, it'd probably be Trevin, like if Aider had to go out right now. But as the season progresses, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see, Phillip Ocon get some reps at some point, either at center or guard. He's got a very bright future. At left guard, Tanner Morley, that was really one of the few positions I think you could set in stone, last winter coming into the year, and felt really confident about it, along with like Braden being the starting quarterback. But Tanner's going to be your starting left guard. Liam Wortman is going to be the starting right guard, with Aider sliding over to center from guard. Liam Wortman has taken that role over, a D2 transfer, guy who's played a lot of football in his career, and you just kind of hope that he can be successful in a similar vein as somebody like Drew Moss, who, played at a lower level, but at a really high level at that level, saying level so many times there, who played at a higher level in what is typically viewed as a lower level of competition. Hopefully that made sense. Anyways, he's going to be the right guard there. I've liked what I've seen from him so far. And then at the tackles, I think Christian Martin will be the starting left tackle. Aaron Karras will be your starting right tackle. And along with Morley, Karras being your starting right tackle was always pretty obvious, coming into this whole process. As far as some of the other guys that'll be in the mix, Norvell mentioned it in that clip, but Alex Foster, he's kind of a Swiss Army knife. He's a veteran player that you would feel comfortable really at either of the tackle or guard positions if necessary. And you love having a guy like that because guys are going to get dinged up. They're going to get the wind knocked out of them, whatever it may be. He should be able to just slide right in, in any of those spots, and you shouldn't skip too much of a beat. MJ Senegal is another kind of swing type tackle. I'm guessing he's going to be the backup right tackle on the 2 deep. We shall see. Philip Ocon, Trevin Hill, again, guys we might see this season as well. And then Berlin Lillard, who's another guy who signed out of high school, Oakland, and is very, very encouraging. So I like the state of the trenches. It was definitely a point of emphasis for Norvell. You got to credit the work that Bill Best has done. I like the outlook of this offensive line, though. They're definitely significantly bigger and more athletic than what we had seen in that room for quite a long time. Let's shout out a couple of other of our partners, and we'll keep this rolling, getting tongue-tied because I'm so excited. Just jazzed to talk football, getting ahead of myself. And then we'll talk about the skill positions. All right, Game Time has all kinds of great things that you can go and do. They've got World Cup tickets. They've actually got exclusive FIFA zones if you're somebody who might be interested and making a trip next summer to go catch some of those World Cup games in person. You can save 10% off exclusive zones for the FIFA World Cup matchups. The Game Time Picks curation function makes it easier than ever. For instance, if you wanted to head over to Coors Field today to catch the Game 4 of the Rockies-Dodgers, Rockies trying to win their 3rd straight series, quietly, really fun since the All-Star break. A disaster of an organization, but it's a lot more endearing. Anyways, the best place to get great deals on those tickets would be with our friends Game Time. They've got all-in pricing, which is super convenient. They've got the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find tickets in the same section, same row for less. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create and redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time? Volo is Denver's most popular provider of adult social sports leagues, pickup games, and events. Sports offered include soccer, volleyball, pickleball, kickball, basketball, cornhole, and many more. I've got some beef with whether pickleball should be classified as a sport or not, but it does get people active, and that's what's great. And that's what's great about Volo. Playing with Volo is a great way to meet new people, make friends, and be social. I really miss, going to the rec back in the day and playing pickup basketball. I need to get signed up with the Volo League. It's a great way to mix up my routine. You can play in Lodo, Rhino, Highlands, City Park, Cherry Creek, South Broadway, and more. Players can sign up as a free agent. You can sign up with a couple of groups, and they'll help you fill out the team. Or, you can come in with a full team. All ability levels and backgrounds are welcome to join. Use that code DNVR10 for $10 off any Volo Denver league. All right. Regular dad bod Ben says, hopeful for Ader, but snapping the ball is a huge part of the game, especially when he has to get his hands back up to block. I should add, I may have explained that poorly. The snap issues that I saw were more prevalent under Trevin, which is why Ader took the job. If I had to, make an assumption, I don't want to speak for Bill Best, but that's why that move is essentially happening. So, take a breath of relief there. Joey said Justin Michael equals the Dr. Phil for Ram fans. Thank you for the outlet and for the content. Thank you guys for always rocking with us. Josh says, I think Wortman follows what the coaches have said when they are looking in the portal. They want experience to come in so they can push the guys they already have on the roster. 100%. He's a perfect example of that. I think the corners that they brought in, the edge rushers that they brought in, really, really good examples of all of that. Josh says pickleball is a CIA psyop if you believe conspiracy Twitter. That's a conspiracy I might be able to get behind, to be honest with you. Just play tennis. Unless you're 80 years old, just play tennis. And I think there's all these stats about old people dropping dead on the pickleball court, having heart attacks. Maybe that's why they shouldn't play tennis, I guess. But I don't know. It just feels like a bastardized version, or kind of like everything we do in America in a nutshell. Instead of playing the real sport instead of eating, cake. We're going to come up with this chemical, sugar-free cake, like just a slightly worse version of something, if that makes sense. Anyways, that's a whole side tangent. Let's get back on track. Let's talk about the skill positions, because I'm really excited. I think this is the most versatility that CSU has had in terms of the athletes that they have on the roster. I just think you've got guys that can fill important roles that they didn't necessarily have. And I think they've got, when you look at the groups, it's guys with different strengths. They're not all just burners. They're not all big-bodied pass catchers, even in the backfield. Let's say Dupree is probably the closest to like a traditional prototypical bell cow 3-down type back. But you're going to use Justin Marshall a ton. And I think if I had to guess, just because he's the more experienced player, Justin Marshall will be listed as the starting running back for that week 1 depth chart. And we're going to see a lot of him, but I've been pretty open about this. I am really high on Jalen Dupree. I've maxed out the credit card on Jalen Dupree's stock. I'm putting it all in him because that's what I think of his game. I just think he is for real. I was excited when they signed him out of Arkansas, and everything that I've seen from him since has only validated that excitement. But Marshall is great. He looks healthy. Looks like he's put on a little bit of muscle, which should be beneficial for his durability. It wouldn't be shocking if you saw them listed as or on the depth chart. I think that could be the case for running back and tight end. They just keep it simple and go Justin Marshall or Jalen Dupree. Or if you really want to get cute, you could go Justin Marshall or Jalen Dupree or Lloyd Avant, who Phil Steele had all kinds of love for. And don't get me wrong, I thought he had a good spring. I like what I've seen from him. I was just surprised that Phil Steele had him. It was like the fourth team all conference or whatever, but he was the running back that he had selected on the backfield. I don't know if his role is in terms of carrying the ball is going to be more significant than Justin Marshall's or Jalen Dupree's, but I do think he's going to get touches because he's a good athlete. He's dynamic in the open space, and he's probably the best option they have for like that scat back role, who you're going to get some of those swing passes to in the open field, quick screens, all that type of stuff. I think everybody is really intriguing. And shoot, Javion Kennard, a true freshman, we're seeing him make plays in practice. He is a dynamic athlete, not the biggest guy in the world, but he is explosive. He is quick and twitchy, and I could see them, finding ways to get him the ball in space, because he's the type of guy, makes one dude miss in the open field, and you look up, all of a sudden it's a 70-yard touchdown. Keegan Hollis, I feel like a broken record, and I feel almost bad talking about it because I feel like I'm inviting the universe to do something about it, because it feels like every time we start hyping this kid up, he unfortunately gets hurt. He's had a couple of great springs, a couple of times now going into camp. He's making plays in practice. He's dependable and trustworthy. The coaching staff is raving about him, and then, gets a concussion or gets another knee injury or whatever it may be. He's just really struggled to stay on the field, which is unfortunate because he is a good football player. He makes plays when he gets touches. And I feel really good about the depth of this backfield, because running backs are going to get dinged up over the course of the season. It's just going to happen. There was a famous Broncos season. Gosh, it was like around 2007-ish. It might have been even a little earlier than that, where they had like 7 or 8 running backs go down. I think that might have even been how Peyton Hillis was able to emerge onto the scene, because he had been more of like a fullback H-back before that, and they just ran out of options, and they put this dude on the field. And then fast forward a couple years, he's on the cover of Madden. It was hilarious how all that played out. But you need depth, you need options, and I like that they're going to have that in the backfield. I think Dupree can do a little bit of it all. I think Marshall is better when you can get him in space, although, I mean, he's so quick and shifty. It's not like he can't run between the tackles. I just worry about durability, given he's not the biggest guy in the world. Avant is more of a bouncy type, scat back, in my opinion. Kennard probably, I don't know, like put him in that like Darren Sproles type role maybe, where it's like he could run the ball, but probably going to be more impactful as a pass catcher. And then Keegan Hollis, like, who knows? It wouldn't shock me if you look up and, it might be more in like garbage time against UNC or something like that. But you look at the box score at the end of the game, and he quietly has like 7 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown or something like that. He's a good athlete. He runs the ball well. He's strong. He's got good vision. I would love to see him have some type of role on the team this year. Going to tight end, a bit of a cop-out, but I did do the Jackson Warren or Rocky Beers. If you put a knife to my back and said you can only pick one in the spring, I would have picked Rocky Beers because I think he was probably the biggest standout throughout the spring and the biggest winner. Based on fall camp, I'm a little bit more inclined to lean Jackson Warren just based on some of the plays that I've seen him make. And I think he's just such a mismatch with his size and athleticism that I really think they're going to do everything in their power to get him in the ball, to get the ball in his hands as much as they possibly can. But I think both of those guys are going to play a big role in the passing offense. And I think it's going to be huge in the red zone. I think it's going to be huge for attacking the middle of the field and being able to go up the seam more consistently than we saw last year. Also, just some of those, plays where you just have the tight end kind of sit in the middle of the field and give the QB an option, give him that security blanket. It was a big missing element from the passing offense last year, and you saw it. And that's not to take any shots at any of the guys that were on the team last year. I am surprised Vince Brown ended up at Missouri, being transparent with all of you guys. He's a really good athlete, but I just mean, I don't know, felt like he often was not getting open. There were some drop issues. Had a couple of touchdowns last year, did make some plays, and was a really good kid. I enjoyed interviewing him. But in terms of the talent they had on the team last year versus the talent that they have on the team this year, I think tight end easily made the most significant jump. Corner, I'd maybe put in the equation as well, though I want to be respectful because I think Dom Jones had a really nice season last year. I think Dom Morris had a nice season as well. But they're just so much more athletic at those position groups this year. And I think it's going to be a big part of the offensive and defensive identity and allows them to be far more aggressive on both sides of the ball. I got somebody in the Toyota chat here. Taylor says, I want to see 30 points a game this year. Let's open it up. I want to see it too. But I think part of that will be that Norvell feels confident in the playmakers he has and the ability to trust his defense for when the offense does go up tempo and it doesn't work out. That's the pitfall of playing that way. And it's why, at least according to him, they made a lot of those changes on the offensive side last year that they didn't think the defense would be able to hold up. It seems like they're going to let it rip on both sides of the ball. They are going to, again, play more up-tempo offensively. They're going to stretch the field vertically more frequently. They're going to spread it out. They're going to throw the ball. It's not to say you just completely abandon what you learned in the run game last year, because I think that was huge. But defensively, they're going to rush the passer more. They're going to play a lot of man coverage corner. They're going to put their players on islands and trust them to make plays, which was not the case in previous years. But it has to be the case if you want to truly be a contender and you want to take that next step and go from being able to beat, teams like San Jose State, New Mexico last year, who I've argued multiple times, CSU teams of the past would have found ways to mess up those games. Against Devin Dampier and that dynamic offense against, really, really Utah State too. You probably could put into that conversation, but like they wouldn't have won that game. Nick Nash would have went crazy for San Jose State. Bryson Barnes would have ran for 200 yards. They just would have found a way to shoot themselves in the foot. They didn't have a perfect season. They didn't show the way we wanted them to in the bowl game. They didn't show up against CU at home. That was really the worst part of the whole season, was just completely laying an egg in that matchup. They can't do that. They can't do that in those September games this year, and that's what we're about to talk about. But kind of wrapping up the projected starting offense here, quarterback is simple. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, he's the guy. I still think Brousseau is the two, but Curry has been getting a lot of reps. Maybe you do, Brousseau or Curry on the depth chart. Taj Bullock is kind of his own deal. Now, you would trust him if you had to in a weird circumstance to take over at quarterback. If there were a bunch of injuries, ejections, just something super weird. Like, he does have that background. But I would put Taj Bullock, and this isn't a position you'll see on the 2 deep, but as like the starting flex. You almost got to go fantasy. Because, again, he's Mr. Do-It-All. He is going to be in that Taysom Hill role. He's at times going to be under center. He's at times going to be in the backfield as more of a running back. He's going to, line up as a receiver, as a tight end. They're going to throw him the ball. He's going to run the ball. He's going to catch the ball. There really isn't anything he isn't going to do for this team this year, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like. I said I'd be surprising if he's actually listed on the 2 deep, especially because I think the program is doing what they can to kind of try and keep him a secret. They're trying to. We'll see. Receiver, easy. Jordan Ross, he's going to be your lead guy. But then I would say Armani Winfield will be opposite of him, and then Tommy Maher in the slot. Again, it's not really as simple as like this guy's 1, this guy's 2, this guy's 3. It's really going to be more about like what are your strengths, what can you do? I think Ross is your most complete receiver. You're hoping for a leap out of Winfield. You guys know how I feel about Tommy Maher. All he does is get open and make plays. Love that dude. He's going to have a great year. But you're going to see a ton of P.D. Tucker out wide. You're going to see a ton of Tay Lanier, who had a great catch in practice the other day. Been a little bit inconsistent at times. Would like to see him kind of, I don't know, there are just times like he'll make this incredible catch in the back of the end zone and then, drop like a slant or something like that. You can't have that. You need to be dependable. But we'll see both those guys, both added through the portal, both veteran receivers, both will have a role in this offense. Kojo and Twee, I think we will see in the mix, probably not until, more like week 3, maybe week 2. Maybe you can get him on the field against UNC, considering his recovery is already definitely ahead of schedule. But, Stephon Daly, McIntyre, some of those other guys, Levon Brown, I think will be in the mix. But I do think you have a pretty clear-cut top 6 in terms of your receivers, and that would be Ross, Maher, and Winfield, Tucker, Lanier, and Antwi, assuming that he's healthy. And then, there's some other guys, depending on the day, the Levon Browns, the Stephon Dalys of the world, who you could see in that mix. It'd be nice if you could see a leap out of some of those young guys, somebody like Landon Bell or something like that. But that's kind of where I have the receivers going into the season. Warren and Beers are going to be an extension of that receiving core. So when you think about it that way, you've really got 8 pass catchers, like traditional pass catchers that you feel really good about. And that's not even getting into the Taj Bullocks or the Javion Kinnards or the Lloyd Avance of the world. I was just drawing a blank on Lloyd Avance's name. We might see a little bit of Carlos Anaya at tight end. We'll see. But that's kind of how I have the offense sorted out at the moment. BFN at QB, Marshall running back 1, Ross Maher and Winfield at receiver, Warren or Beers at tight end, Martin at left tackle, Morley at left guard, Ader at center, Liam Wertman at right guard, Aaron Karras at right tackle. And then, this is special teams technically, but Hankins as your starting kicker, Brian Hansen as your starting punter, if I had to bet as of now. But they've got the Aussie kid as well, so we'll see. But Hansen has been more consistent from what I have seen at the days that I've been at camp. That's what I've got going into the year. That's my vision for the offense. I really hope it comes to fruition that, it's not just words, at the beginning of the year and coaches, using all the cliches. I think from what I have seen, they passed the eye test visually, like athletically. That hasn't always been the case. I think they could have been far better in 2022 had they not lost so many of those guys that they invested in the spring, Dante and Ty, and even, God, what was the Melquan Stovall, the kid that came over from Nevada and then dipped. But I feel good about this skill group, and I feel good about this team's chance to make some noise. Let me take a quick breath here real quick. And then I wanted to talk about those trips to Bama. We're 9 days away from the start of the regular season. I saw somebody tweet this, we're Warren Jackson days away from the first CSU football game. Shout out Warren, number 9 days away. Made me think of those Bama games because he scored twice in that trip to Tuscaloosa in 2017. And I think those games are great examples of the type of showing you would like to see from CSU to inspire some confidence. Obviously, best case, you win the game. That'd be great, but you're going to be, like 20-point dogs going in. You can't just get curb stomped the way you did against Michigan and against Texas. I mean, this is year 4. You've got a third-year starting quarterback. You've got playmakers, and you're not going to be expected to win. You can lose by multiple scores even, and still, I think, come away feeling pretty optimistic, which was the case when CSU went to Bama in 2013 and 2017. You just glance at the box scores. It doesn't tell the whole picture. In 2013, you lost 31-6. That game, though, was 7-0 after the first quarter. It was 17-6 going into the fourth. CSU's driving. They turn the ball over. They throw a pick. Unfortunately, they had a couple of drives after basically not doing anything offensively for much of the first half. They kind of got it rolling there in the third quarter, had to settle for field goals. But they're driving, they throw a pick, it kind of turns the game as along with a blocked punt that Bama returned for a score. And then they also threw like a 30-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter, but it was a fourth down conversion. My point here is the game was a lot more competitive than that final score maybe indicates. And you go and you look back to what some of the Bama players had to say after the fact, talking about how it was kind of a somber mood in the locker room because they knew CSU pushed them to the brink, and that that final score shows a 25-point win, but it was not a 25-point win with how that game played out. And they held TJ Yeldon to 66 rushing yards and 21 carries. He obviously went on to the NFL. 38 of those rushing yards, though, 38 of his 66 yards came on one carry. So that means his other 20 carries totaled just 28 yards. I think if anything, if CSU were to have a chance to put Washington on upset alert, this is probably the most important factor. You have to have some success in the trenches. If they can run the ball with ease, like Bama did in 2017, frankly, but if you can do that, it really puts you in a tough spot, especially because it just opens everything up. Play action. They've got a quarterback who can use his legs well. The Rams are going to have to stop the run with some consistency if they're going to be competitive in this game. It was a big factor in that 2013 game, just the arrival of the front seven and how well they showed in that game. Shaq Barrett had a sack and a half and 5 tackles. Aaron Davis, who went on to play for the Raiders for a little bit, he led the team with 11 tackles. Trent had a good game. Offensively, Hansley had like 81 receiving yards. Richard had 7 catches for 71. Your star players, your Richard Higgins, the Shaq Barretts, even Aaron Davis, who went on to the NFL. Grayson had a pretty solid game, all things considered. Those guys have got to step up and make plays. And, Torrey, he mossed Will Johnson in that Michigan game. Will Johnson still refers to it as the worst game of his career, actually. Like, that was great. But really, since then, we haven't seen anybody step up in these types of matchups and make some plays with any type of consistency for CSU. And it's why it's been so hard to stomach when we've had to watch these Texas matchups, even like the CU game. Like, you need your best players to show something in this. Maybe you lose by multiple scores in the end, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to hold your head up high and feel like you competed. I love this quote from Jim McElwain after the 2013 matchup. We challenged our guys to come in here and go toe-to-toe. I think the guys on the other sideline have earned some respect for the Colorado State Rams and how hard we play the game. Realistically, you're probably not going to win this matchup against Washington. God, it'd be epic to see it happen. And then all of a sudden, you're going to get greedy with your hopes and expectations for the year. Let's run the table. Let's go to the playoff, all that. But you got to show something. You've got to be able to walk away feeling like your star players made some plays and that against lesser competition, their abilities are really going to stand out, like Shaq Barrett, like Richard Higgins. Or if you want to look at 2017, Nick Stevens threw a couple of touchdowns and rushed for one. Warren Jackson, that was kind of his breakout game. He caught a couple of touchdowns in that matchup. 2017, funny enough, like the 31-6 score just on paper doesn't sound as competitive as the 2017 score, which was 41-23. I actually think CSU had a better chance of winning that game in 2013 than they did in 2017. And that just has to do with like that 2017 game. The first quarter was insane. It was 17-0 after the first. They outgained CSU in total yards, like 200-11 or something like that. Jalen Hurts rushed for a touchdown of like 30 yards, 27, I guess it says in my notes. He also threw touchdowns of 78 and 52 yards. That game got out of hand quickly, but to CSU's credit, they didn't get shell-shocked by the moment. They came back and they competed in the second quarter. By the halftime, it was 24-10, which you felt pretty good about. You outscored them 10-7 in the second quarter. In the third quarter, you had a couple of promising drives that ended because of turnovers, but you were moving the ball well. And then that culminated in the fourth quarter with mounting back-to-back touchdown drives. Michael Gallup scored, I believe, and then Warren scored his second of 2 touchdowns, or maybe it was the Stevens rushing touchdown. It doesn't matter. I think that's what it was. I think Gallup should have had a touchdown. They took away for review, and then Warren scored the next play. None of that matters. The point is that they pushed Bama, actually so much so that Saban put the starting offense back on the field after CSU, produced back-to-back scoring drives in that fourth quarter there. And I love the quote that he had post game. Did I want to do that? No. If you want to criticize me for it, fine. But they weren't going to get the ball back because we weren't stopping them and they were trying to win the game. I love that. You push them. You earn the respect of your opponent in those matchups. That hasn't been the case for CSU in these September matchups against Power 4 opponents. 2022, it is what it is. You didn't have the guys. Even 2023, you're pretty significantly outmatched in a couple of those games. Tech, you're not playing Texas this year. Washington's going to be much improved from what they were a year ago, I think. But this isn't the type of game where I feel like you can leave feeling with any type of confidence if the final score is 50-3. If it's, like that Texas game last year where you just show nothing. I guess Justin Marshall had 100 rushing yards. Kenyon Aggers flashed a little bit as an edge rusher. But really other than that, you showed absolutely nothing in that game. And even really the couple weeks after that, UTEP and UNC were frustrating. And UNC, I wonder if maybe you held a little bit back. Knowing that you had CU the upcoming week, I do think one thing I would be somewhat critical of Norvell over the last couple of years. I think he overthinks things at times and maybe gets in his own head and makes things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. I think how they kind of handled those first couple of games last year would be an example of that. But I think going to Seattle, making some plays, having Tommy Maher make some plays, having Dupree or whatever it is, having Donut, get a couple of sacks defensively. I just think it would do wonders from a confidence standpoint, from a positive momentum standpoint. Just get something rolling, get that momentum going in September instead of having to dig yourself out of a hole. Now, an upset, that would be absolutely epic. I'm not going to hold my breath in that matchup. I don't think it's a failed season if you go into Seattle and you lose to a Big Ten team. It is funny, just the concept of it. Norvell, who grew up in Wisconsin, yesterday was like, I never thought I'd be going west as somebody who grew up in Wisconsin for a Big Ten matchup. Certainly never thought it'd be in the Pacific time zone. It is what it is. We all know realignment is wonky. But I think showing something in this matchup and playing competitively and seeing some guys make some plays, I think it's huge. I think it's huge for getting everybody to buy into what's being built right now. I think it's huge for getting people excited for those home games. And then that's really what's going to dictate either way, the direction of your season is how they fare in those UTSA and Washington State matchups. Obviously you got to beat UNC, but that one's like, no duh. I mean, if you lose that game, you might as well fold up shop then I can't sit here and argue against anybody if they're saying the sky is falling, because if you lose to UNC, the sky is falling. But I want to see CSU show something in that Washington matchup, and we'll get a little bit more in depth next week in terms of previewing it and kind of, the guys to know on Washington and all that. But I think the biggest lessons we can take from those trips to Tuscaloosa, your top end talent needs to be on display. You need your Shaq Barretts and Rashard Higgins to make a couple of plays and show that they've got guys who can make plays too. You need to have success in the trenches. You need to be able to stop the run. It's paramount if you're going to have a realistic chance of pushing your opponent and actually making them sweat. You can't play scared. You can't approach things the way you did against Texas or even Michigan, which was more justifiable given the disparity in talent at the time. But again, I don't feel like this is one of those matchups. Yeah, you're playing a good team, probably even a team who's going to be ranked at some point this year, but you can't play scared. And if you're going to have any chance of pulling the upset, you've got to get them back on their heels a little bit. And then finally, turnovers are key. In both of those games against Alabama, as much as you did well in those matchups, while you felt like you could leave holding your head up high and all that, there was a blocked punt, there was an interception in the second half in the 2013 matchup. Both of those were huge. 2017, you're driving in the third quarter, you turn the ball over a couple of times as well. Turnovers are killer. If you're going to pull an upset, you basically have to play a perfect game, and turnovers are obviously the great equalizer. You need to win the turnover margin, I think, if you have any chance. But at the very least, if you want to keep things competitive, that's going to be a big factor. Josh wants to know, do we see someone take a Peter Montini type role or the extra O-line role like we saw last year? That's a good question. I think maybe in some goal line type scenarios that might end up being Alex Foster. But that is a good question. I'll have to keep an eye on that over the next week or so in practice. Before we get out of here, and I'm not going to go crazy in depth on the week 0 slate, just some storylines that I'll be keeping an eye on from a Mountain West standpoint. how does that UNLV quarterback battle look? Does it look like it's going to be Calandria, who I assume will win the job, or does Orji shock me and show that he can throw the ball with more consistency? He's a phenomenal athlete, and I think they'll probably try and take advantage of the running abilities of both of those guys. But to me, just from a consistency standpoint, I have a hard time seeing Orji win this gig. Let me throw it to overtime real quick. If you are watching on, the TV platforms, go to thednvr.com to check out the rest of the show. If you're on the other platforms, you're obviously fine. Let's go to OT real quick. All right. Off of that, what is this whole thing going to look like under Dan Mullen? You return one or two starters from last year. I've read one a bunch of times. I had some UNLV fans get upset with me the other day and say it's two. I guess that changes everything. But can the Rebels keep the train on the tracks post Barry Odom? I was bummed for their fans that he left, especially for a gig like Purdue. I mean, it'd be like if Medved left for Minnesota, but he had no ties to the program whatsoever, was just taking that gig just because it's a Big Ten gig. In the Fresno State Kansas game, how does EJ Warner look on the road? He's a guy who's had some turnover problems throughout his career. He's thrown for a lot of yards, thrown a lot of touchdowns, but he's thrown it up there in that type of setting. What does the offense look like? How does he handle that? Do they run the ball with any type of consistency? Does that help him limit, some of the turnover prone stuff that he's had? What does EJ Warner look like? And then, the nightcap, Stanford, Hawaii, that game actually on CBS, which is exciting. Can Timmy Chang and Hawaii validate my preseason optimism with a big home win? They've been way better at home than on the road over the years, especially under Chang. How does Alhado look under center? Can he elevate that team, take advantage of all the talent they have out wide? They've got a great receiving core, with Ashlock and trying to blank on the other receiver's name, but they've got two of the three preseason all-conference receivers were Hawaii. What does that offense look like? And more importantly, what does the defense look like? Because that's kind of been the bugaboo for them over the years. I'm excited for the Iowa State-Kansas State game in Dublin, although if I'm being real with you, I kind of hate the concept of playing college football games overseas. Like, college football is about as uniquely American as it gets. I don't even like neutral site games. I don't like removing them from campuses. So playing them overseas, I just think it's a unique experience, and I get that, but you're just losing all of the atmosphere and the passion of being on, your campus on a Saturday. But it'll be a fun matchup. At least we've got some interesting games. Sam Houston also plays Western Kentucky this weekend. It's here. We made it. College football is officially here. I'm stoked. Regular Dadbot says, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any infamous John Madden quote. Could be the case for a couple of Mountain West teams this year. I mean, really, you look at UNLV, Air Force, that's not decided. A couple of other gigs like New Mexico and Fresno. Guys won the gig, but will they be able to hold on to it? We shall see. Josh says, also former CSU linebacker Bama Mina is the UNLV linebackers coach. That is cool. He had to unfortunately medically retire a couple years ago after transferring to UNLV. Has worked his way up, though, was, just like a student coach assistant, then was a GA, now he's linebackers coach. You love to see that. But I can't wait for this weekend, man. I cannot wait to see some real life college football action. Just in case you're curious for next week, I think we're going to be going live on Tuesday and Friday. The following week is TBD because of Labor Day. My goal is for the schedule to be Mondays and Fridays throughout the regular season and basically keep that consistent throughout. But I'll give you guys an update as soon as we have all of that locked in. Final question here. Josh says, would you rather have two quarterbacks or three coaches calling plays? Shout out to Auburn, the dumbest football program in the country. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love to everybody for rocking with us. Shout out to our super producer, Kale, for making things run so smoothly today. Always proud to be y'all. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.